Before we start, you should know this might be hard to hear. This is just for learning and fun. This is the real words from the court where Sean Diddy Combs was on trial. A news group called Inner City Press told us about it. If you like this kind of news, please click like and follow our channel for more big legal news. What did that lawyer say that made the judge look so mad? What was on that tape that made everyone in the room gasp and cover their mouths? And why did Sean Diddy Combs suddenly look like a man who knew his whole world was falling apart? In a big courthouse where Sean Diddy Combs was facing really bad charges, something crazy happened. Judge Saunders did something that almost never happens in famous cases. She told Diddy's main lawyer, Marc, to leave the courtroom right away. This happened after a secret tape was played that showed the lawyer had lied under oath just minutes before. The tape wasn't just bad, it was really bad. It showed conversations between Diddy and his lawyers where they talked about messing with witnesses, changing evidence, and working together to make people stay quiet who might speak against the music star. As the tape played, people said Diddy's face turned white while his lawyer tried to stop it from playing, but that just made things worse with each try. The judge wasn't just angry, she was really mad. In my 30 years as a judge, I have never seen such a clear try to mess up justice in my courtroom, she said, her voice sharp like a knife as she told the guard to take Agnifilo out. The lawyer, who used to walk through courthouse halls with confidence, now walked out in shame. His career as a lawyer was hanging by a thread. This isn't just another celebrity problem. This is when a powerful man's carefully made defense plan fell apart right in front of everyone. This is about what happens when a lawyer crosses the line between fighting hard for their client and helping with crimes. And most importantly, this is about what was on that secret tape that was so bad it caused the judge to do something legal experts are calling never before seen. Before we start, you should know this might be hard to hear. This is just for learning and fun. This is the real words from the court where Sean Diddy Combs was on trial. A news group called Inner City Press told us about it. Nobody thought the prosecutors would have secret tapes of Diddy's own legal team. The room was tense. Eyes focused on the evidence table until the prosecutor said they had a surprise piece of evidence. People gasped. Even the judge froze. No warning, no written statement, just Diddy sitting there, his fingers holding the edge of the table so tight his knuckles turned white. Until that moment, Diddy had kept a calm, almost bored look during the whole trial. But something had changed. Maybe it was the way the prosecutor smiled a little when announcing the new evidence. Maybe it was the way his lawyer suddenly sat up straight in his chair. Maybe it was the whispers that went through the courtroom. Whatever it was, Diddy was done pretending this was just another problem he could buy his way out of. Marc Agnifilo wasn't defending his client as just a celebrity lawyer. He was there as a man who had put his reputation on this case, who had told the press over and over that the charges were crazy lies. And when he started to speak, the courtroom wasn't ready for what they would hear. Because what Marc Agnifilo said about his defense plan, the specific ways they planned to work, and what it meant for witness honesty wasn't just tough legal moves. It was a warning shot to anyone thinking of testifying against his client. The Manhattan Federal Courthouse has seen lots of famous cases, but today was different. The prosecution team led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Jessica Roberts walked up to the judge with an evidence folder that wasn't on the list they had shared before. Defense lawyer Marc Agnifilo right away said no, standing up with practiced confidence. Your Honor, this is really wrong and unfair. The prosecution has to share all evidence during discovery, Agnifilo said, his voice steady and sure. Judge Saunders looked over her glasses. Think about it. Ms. Roberts, explain yourself, the judge demanded. The prosecutor stepped forward. Your Honor, this evidence came to us less than 24 hours ago. It directly goes against statements made by defense lawyer in this very courtroom yesterday. We believe it shows an ongoing try to mess up justice. The judge narrowed her eyes. Come here, as both lawyers huddled at the judge's desk for a whispered talk. Diddy leaned toward his second lawyer, whispering urgently. Something about the way he kept looking at the prosecution's table suggested real worry behind his otherwise calm outside look. After several tense minutes, Judge Saunders nodded seriously. I'll allow it. The jury has a right to hear this. Agnifilo's face turned red. Your Honor, I must strongly say no. No, Judge Saunders said sharply. Miss Roberts, go ahead. The prosecutor went back to her table and got a small digital recorder. The government would like to enter into evidence Exhibit 47B, an audio recording made on June 12th of this year. And that's when everything changed. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, the press hunched in their special rows, and lawyers whispered plans as they waited for Judge Saunders to enter the courtroom. But when the prosecution said they had new evidence that had not been part of discovery, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a trick. But the way Assistant U.S. Attorney Jessica Roberts stood with total confidence, a thin evidence folder in her hands, told everyone this was real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been scrolling through his phone, suddenly looked alert, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Marc Agnifilo stood up quickly, buttoning his suit jacket. No eye contact with anyone. He didn't even look at his client. Your Honor, before we go on, Agnif started, I need to talk to the court about this supposed new evidence. The judge let him. And from that moment on, the entire trial changed because what Agnifilo was about to say wasn't part of any media story. It wasn't a social media leak. It was something that had haunted the case for months. The story of how we got here started 3 months ago when the first accusations against Sean Diddy Combs came up. At first, many people dismissed them as greedy claims against a rich celebrity. The case got serious when federal agents raided Diddy's Miami and Los Angeles homes. What they found led to multiple charges including sex trafficking, racketeering, and witness intimidation. From the beginning, Diddy had hired Marc Agnifilo, a defense lawyer known for representing high-profile clients in cases that seemed impossible to win. Agnifilo had built his reputation defending pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli and Nexium cult leader Keith Reary. While he hadn't won those cases, his aggressive defense ways and media skills had made him the go-to lawyer for wealthy clients facing serious criminal charges. In the weeks before trial, Agnifilo had been everywhere, on cable news, in newspaper interviews, on legal podcasts, confidently breaking down the prosecution's case point by point. My client is being targeted because of his success, his influence, and yes, his race, he told one interviewer. The government has built a case on the testimony of people with clear money reasons to lie. Agnifilo's pre-trial plan had worked well. Public opinion polls showed growing doubt about the charges. Several witnesses had suddenly become unavailable or changed key details in their statements. The prosecution seemed to be struggling. But something changed last week when a former employee of Diddy's legal team went to federal prosecutors with information. This unnamed person claimed to have evidence that Agnifilo was not just defending his client. He was actively participating in witness tampering and evidence manipulation. The bombshell accusation was kept quiet as prosecutors checked the information and got a sealed warrant to collect evidence. In court today, Agnifilo had been particularly tough in his cross-examination of a former assistant to Diddy. The young woman testified that she had seen Diddy threatening people and coordinating what he called cleanup crews to handle problem situations. Isn't it true that you're only testifying because you were fired for theft? Agnifilo had asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer as. No, that's not true, the witness had replied firmly. We have records showing you were fired for stealing jewelry worth over $50,000. Agnifilo pressed, holding up a document. Those records were made up after I reported Mr. Combs to the authorities, the witness insisted. I was never accused of theft until after I came forward. Agnifilo had smiled thinly. So you're suggesting a successful businessman worth hundreds of millions of dollars would frame a former assistant for theft? That seems hard to believe, doesn't it? It was at this moment that the prosecution had asked to approach the bench and shortly after announced they had new evidence to present. As Judge Saunders looked at the prosecution's evidence at the bench, Agnifilo's confident behavior started to crack. His whispered conversation with the judge and prosecutor got more and more heated, visible even to those in the gallery. When the judge returned to her seat, her expression was serious. "In light of this new evidence, I'm going to ask the jury to step out for a moment," she announced. As the jurors filed out, confused murmurs spread through the courtroom. "Mr. Agnifilo," Judge Saunders said once the jury was gone, "the prosecution has presented evidence that directly goes against statements you've made to this court. Before we go on, I want to make sure you understand how serious this situation is." Agnif nodded, his earlier confidence diminished. "I understand, Your Honor, very well. Ms. Roberts, you may play the recording." As the prosecutor prepared the audio equipment, Diddy leaned over to his second chair attorney, his expression unreadable. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on the small speaker that was about to change everything. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," the voice on the recording said. It was clearly Marc Agnif's voice. "I've won impossible cases. I've kept wealthy clients out of prison, but none of that can hide what I know, what I've done, and who made it happen." The recording was being played in open court now after the judge had decided it was allowed despite the defense's strong objections. The quality was surprisingly clear, a conversation recorded in what sounded like an office or conference room. A second voice spoke, clearly recognizable as Diddy's. "You did what you were paid to do." Agnif's recorded voice continued, "The Vasquez girl is the problem. She knows too much about the Miami house and the parties. We need to make sure she's not believable if she testifies." The real Agnifilo sitting in the courtroom had gone completely still. Diddy was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. "I've got someone reaching out to her," Diddy replied on the tape. "She'll get the message." "No, no, no," Agnif's voice said quickly. "Don't do it that way." "Oh, that's how you got into this mess. We need to be smarter. I've got a private investigator who can find something on her. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has made mistakes. We just need one thing that I can use to destroy her on the stand." There was a pause. Then Diddy's voice again. "What about those other documents the prosecution has?" "Your Honor, my client deserves representation of his choosing. This is a violation of his Sixth Amendment rights." Judge Saunders fixed him with an icy stare. "Mr. Combes will be represented by co-counsel until new lead counsel can be arranged. And Mr. Nallo, consider yourself fortunate that I'm not holding you in contempt and having you taken into custody right now. The U.S. Attorney's Office will determine whether criminal charges are appropriate." The bailiff took Agnifilo by the arm. For a moment it seemed the attorney might resist, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. As he was led toward the exit, he didn't look at Diddy once. Judge Saunders addressed the remaining defense attorney. "We'll recess until tomorrow morning to give the defense team time to regroup. I suggest you use that time wisely, counselor." As Agnifilo disappeared through the courtroom doors, the reality of what had just happened seemed to hit Diddy. The music mogul who had built an empire, who had always been able to control his environment and the people in it, sat motionless, watching as his carefully constructed defense crumbled before his eyes. The secret recording revealed much more than just attorney misconduct. It exposed a pattern of control and manipulation that prosecutors claimed had been Diddy's modus operandi for decades. As the trial continued the next day, with Diddy's secondary attorney now leading the defense, the prosecution built on the bombshell revelation by connecting it to a larger pattern. Prosecutor Jessica Roberts addressed the court with renewed confidence. "What you heard yesterday wasn't an isolated incident," she told the jury. "It was business as usual for Mr. Combes, a glimpse into how he and his enablers have operated for years." Roberts methodically laid out what she called Diddy's system of silence. Starting with his earliest days in the music industry, former Bad Boy Records employees testified about NDA, so restrictive they couldn't even acknowledge they had signed them. Others described a workplace culture where loyalty was demanded and questioning Diddy's actions meant immediate termination and blacklisting throughout the industry. Jasmine Taylor, a former assistant, took the stand and described following Diddy into his private office for what she thought was a meeting about an upcoming event. Instead, what she saw shook her to the core. There were documents spread across his desk. "Some I recognized from our normal business operations. Some look like private investigator reports with photos attached. There were folders with names of people I knew had spoken out against him. And did he He was reviewing them with a calm focus, like it was the most normal thing in the world. She paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know how to leave, and that was the point. Once you're in, you're in. Taylor continued, her voice steady but hollow. A few days after accidentally seeing those files, I got a call. Blocked number. All the voice said was, "Smart people know when to see nothing and say nothing." Then they hung up. She thought it was just a prank until an envelope arrived at her apartment. It was unmarked. Inside was a detailed report about her family, her parents' address, her sister's workplace, her nephew's school schedule. I almost didn't look at the second page, but I did. It was photos of me entering my therapist's office, my pharmacy records showing my anxiety medication, screenshots of private messages I'd sent years ago during a bad breakup. I don't remember how they got all this, but there they were. Proof that I was being watched. Oh. Taylor testified that the fear she felt in that moment was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. I realized I wasn't just hired as an assistant. I was brought into a system designed to protect one man at all costs. The prosecution connected Taylor's experience to dozens of others, showing how Diddy had created an intricate web of surveillance, intimidation, and retaliation. Former security team members testified about being directed to follow people who had disappointed Diddy, to gather compromising information, or to deliver what were called reminder messages. Michael Chen, who had worked as part of Diddy's security detail for 3 years, described how the operation worked. There was a tiered system, he explained. Level 1 was just observation, following someone, documenting their movements. Level 2 involved making contact, letting them know they were being watched. Level 3, he hesitated. Please continue, Mr. Chen, the prosecutor urged. Level 3 involved what Mr. Combs called creating leverage, finding or sometimes manufacturing compromising situations, recording them, and then making sure the person knew what we had. This testimony directly connected to the recording of Agnif discussing how to discredit witnesses. It wasn't just aggressive legal strategy, it was part of a long-established system. Perhaps most disturbing was the testimony about how people who crossed Diddy would suddenly find themselves facing unrelated problems. Record deals would fall through, job offers would be rescinded. Apartments would become unavailable. Credit scores would mysteriously plummet. It wasn't always something you could prove was him, explained music producer Darren Williams. But everyone knew you'd get blackballed, and people wouldn't even tell you why they couldn't work with you. They just say, I heard things, or it's complicated. But you knew. Everyone knew. Williams described how, after a disagreement with Diddy over production credits, he found himself unable to book studio time anywhere in Los Angeles. Studio owners who'd been my friends for years suddenly had no availability. One finally told me off the record, man, I can't help you. He'll pull all his artists from my space. As the prosecution built this larger picture, they repeatedly referenced the recording of Agnifilo and Diddy, showing that the attorney hadn't invented these tactics. He had simply integrated himself into a system that was already well established. This wasn't just about winning a court case, Prosecutor Roberts told the jury. This was about maintaining a decades-long system of control and intimidation, a system that allowed Mr. Combs to operate with impunity because those who might speak against him knew the price of doing so. By the third day following Agnifil's removal, the trial had reached a breaking point. Diddy's new lead attorney, Patricia Morrison, a respected defense lawyer brought in on an emergency basis, was fighting an uphill battle. The damage done by the recording was proving nearly impossible to mitigate. Morrison did her best to create distance between her client and Agnifil's actions. My client trusted his attorney to act ethically and within the bounds of the law, she argued. Mr. Combs is not a lawyer. He relied on Mr. Agnif's guidance and expertise. But the prosecution wasn't allowing that separation. Mr. Combs wasn't just following his attorney's lead. Prosecutor Roberts countered. As we heard in the recording, he was an active participant in these discussions. He understood exactly what was happening. The breaking point came when the prosecution called their surprise witness, Rachel Kim, the female voice heard on the recording cautioning Agnifilo about his tactics. Kim had been a junior attorney on Diddy's defense team. As Kim took the stand, Diddy visibly tensed. His remaining attorneys huddled in urgent consultation. "Ms. Kim," Prosecutor Roberts began, "can you please identify your voice on this recording?" After the relevant portion was played, Kim nodded. "Yes, that's me." "And what position did you hold at that time?" "I was an associate at Benson, Agnifilo and Partners assigned to Mr. Combs' defense team." "Why did you make this recording?" Kim took a deep breath. "I became increasingly concerned about the direction the defense was taking. Strategies being discussed went far beyond zealous representation into what I believed was criminal conduct. What specifically concerned you? Plans to interfere with witnesses, to illegally access and delete electronic evidence, to manufacture false narratives about victims' mental health. I raised my concerns internally first, following proper channels. I was ignored, then sidelined, and finally threatened with career-ending consequences if I didn't get with the program." "What made you decide to record these conversations?" "When I realized my concerns were being dismissed, I felt I had an ethical obligation as an attorney to document what was happening. The rules of professional conduct are clear about our duty to the justice system." Defense attorney Morrison was on her feet immediately. "Objection. Miss Kim violated attorney-client privilege. This entire line of testimony is inadmissible." Judge Saunders shook her head. "As I've already ruled, the crime-fraud exception applies." "Overruled," Kim continued, describing a pattern of increasingly unethical and illegal behavior. She testified that after the recorded meeting, she had been removed from the defense team and threatened with legal action if she spoke about anything she had witnessed. "I was told my career would be over, that I'd never work in law again," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious emotion. "But I became a lawyer because I believe in justice." What was happening wasn't justice. It was obstruction. The courtroom was hushed as Kim described bringing the recording to the prosecutors. "I knew I was risking everything professionally, but there are some lines you can't cross even for a client." During cross-examination, Morrison tried to paint Kim as disgruntled, suggesting she had recorded the conversation out of spite after being sidelined on a major case. "Isn't it true that you were passed over for a promotion shortly before making this recording?" Morrison asked. Kim didn't flinch. "No, that's not accurate. I was actually offered a significant bonus to continue working on the case, conditional on my full cooperation with defense strategies." "And you turned that down?" "Yes, because I understood what full cooperation meant in this context." Morrison tried another angle. "Miss Kim, isn't it true that you had previously expressed admiration for Prosecutor Roberts' work, that you had professional aspirations to join the U.S. Attorney's Office?" "I've expressed admiration for many attorneys on both sides of the courtroom," Kim replied calmly. "That has nothing to do with my ethical obligations as a member of the bar." As the cross-examination continued, Diddy became increasingly agitated. He whispered urgently to his attorneys, passed notes, and at one point had to be quietly cautioned by Morrison to maintain his composure. The final blow came when Morrison asked, "If you were so concerned about these alleged unethical discussions, why didn't you simply resign from the case immediately?" Kim looked directly at Diddy for the first time. "Because I was afraid." Mr. Agnifilo had made it clear what happens to people who cross him or Mr. Combs. "I've seen what happened to others who spoke up. I needed to protect myself, and I needed evidence that would be taken seriously." In that moment, the courtroom could feel the case shifting decisively. Diddy, who had maintained a careful mask of confidence throughout the proceedings, finally showed a crack in his facade as he looked away from Kim's steady gaze. The pattern of control that had protected him for so long was unraveling thread by thread in the harsh light of the courtroom. The following day, the prosecution delivered what many observers later called the knockout blow. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jessica Roberts approached the bench with yet another evidence folder. "Your Honor, in light of Miss Kim's testimony yesterday, we've obtained a warrant to search additional devices belonging to Mr. Agnifilo. What we found corroborates everything Miss Kim testified to and more." Judge Saunders reviewed the new evidence and nodded grimly. "Proceed, Ms. Roberts." Roberts turned to address the court. "Ladies and gentlemen, What you're about to hear is a conversation that took place in Mr. Combs' private office 3 weeks ago, recorded automatically by his security system. Defense attorney Morrison objected immediately. Your Honor, this is outrageous. The prosecution cannot simply continue springing new evidence mid-trial. We haven't had any opportunity to review this material. The warrant was properly executed last night, counsel, Judge Saunders replied. The prosecution provided this evidence to the court at the earliest possible moment. Your objection is noted, but I'm allowing it. As the new recording began to play, Diddy's voice came through clearly. I'm tired of these people thinking they can come at me. Make an example of Thompson. I don't care how you do it, Agnes' voice responded. We've got something brewing there. Trust me, by the time I'm done with her on the stand, the jury will think she's a pathological liar. That's not enough, Diddy insisted, his voice hard. She needs to understand there are consequences. Sean, listen to me, Agnes said, his tone cautious. We have to be smart right now. Let me handle this my way. Legal intimidation, discrediting her in court, that's effective and it's clean. Your way isn't working fast enough, Diddy snapped. People still coming forward, still talking. Fix it. Recording continued for several more minutes, detailing specific plans to pressure witnesses into changing their testimony or disappearing altogether. When it ended, the courtroom was absolutely silent. Diddy sat motionless, staring straight ahead. His remaining attorneys looked shell-shocked. Judge Saunders broke the silence. In light of this new evidence, I'm ordering Mr. Combs remanded into custody immediately. Bail is revoked. The defense team erupted in protests as 2 U.S. Marshals approached Diddy. For a brief moment, it seemed the music mogul might resist, but then his shoulders slumped slightly. The first real surrender anyone had seen from him. As the Marshals prepared to take him into custody, Prosecutor Roberts asked for one final statement. Your Honor, in addition to the charges Mr. Holmes already faces, the government will be filing new charges of witness tampering and obstruction of justice based on these recordings. Judge Saunders nodded. So noted. As Diddy was led away, a reporter in the gallery stood up suddenly. Mr. Combs, do you have anything to say about the recordings? Before the Marshals could intervene, Diddy turned. For a moment, the old confidence flashed in his eyes, the familiar, commanding presence that had defined his public persona for decades. But it faltered quickly, replaced by something rarely seen: uncertainty. The system failed me, he said simply, before being led from the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, including former associates, accusers who had come forward, and media from around the world. The scene was chaotic as news of Diddy's remand into custody spread. Jessica Roberts emerged from the building hours later, surrounded by her prosecution team. She approached the forest of microphones with measured steps. Today we've seen that no one is above the law, she stated firmly. No amount of money, fame, or influence can place you beyond accountability. The justice system may not be perfect, but today it worked exactly as it should. As she fielded questions, the conversation turned to Marc Agnifilo, who was reportedly facing disbarment proceedings and potential criminal charges of his own. Mr. Agnif's actions represent a profound betrayal of his oath as an attorney, Roberts said. But more importantly, they represent part of a larger system that allowed powerful individuals to manipulate the truth and silence victims. That system is being dismantled piece by piece. As night fell on the courthouse, the impact of the day's events was still reverberating through the legal community and entertainment industry. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now in federal custody, his empire crumbling, his freedom in serious jeopardy. In the days following Diddy's remand to custody and the explosive courtroom revelations, the ripple effects spread throughout the entertainment industry and legal world. Legal analysts who had initially predicted a difficult case for prosecutors now spoke of overwhelming evidence and inevitable conviction. The removal of Marc Agnifilo from the case became a flashpoint for discussions about legal ethics and the line between zealous representation and criminal conspiracy. Bar associations across the country issued statements reaffirming ethical obligations, and law schools hastily organized panels to discuss the implications. For his final statement before being taken into custody, Diddy had claimed the system failed me. But as more evidence emerged, it became clear that what had actually failed was a different system. The elaborate machinery of protection, intimidation, and control that had insulated him from consequences for decades. Inside the industry, a reckoning had begun. Executives who had long turned blind eyes to troubling behavior were suddenly facing hard questions. Artists who had remained silent out of fear were finding their voices. The code of silence that had protected powerful abusers was showing cracks. Major music labels issued carefully worded statements about zero tolerance for abuse and commitment to safe working environments. Streaming platforms quietly removed Diddy's music from featured playlists. Former business partners distanced themselves with remarkable speed. Perhaps most significantly, other victims began coming forward. Not just those connected to Diddy, but those who had suffered similar abuse at the hands of other powerful figures in entertainment, sports, and business. Hotlines set up for industry abuse reported record numbers of calls. As legal experts dissected the case on cable news and podcasts, one comment from former federal prosecutor Elena Michaels captured the essence of what had happened. What we're witnessing isn't just the fall of one powerful man. It's the beginning of the collapse of a system that has protected many. When people see that even someone with Diddy's resources and connections can be held accountable, it changes the calculation for victims who have been silent and for other powerful abusers who thought they were untouchable. The judge's decision to remove Marc Agnifilo and later remand Diddy to custody represented more than just procedural rulings. They were moments when the machinery of justice asserted itself against the machinery of power and privilege. In jail awaiting the continuation of his trial, Diddy reportedly retained yet another legal team, this one specializing in damage control rather than criminal defense. Sources close to the case suggested he was finally beginning to understand the gravity of his situation, that no amount of money or influence might save him from a lengthy prison sentence. Rachel Kim, the junior attorney whose recording had exposed Agnifi's unethical behavior, faced her own challenges. While many in the legal community praised her courage as a whistleblower, others criticized her for violating what they saw as attorney-client confidentiality. Law firms were reportedly reluctant to hire her despite her clear ethical stance. "I knew there would be consequences," she told a legal journal, "but some principles are worth the sacrifice." As for Marc, the disgraced attorney had virtually disappeared from public view. His law firm removed his name from their website within hours of his courtroom ejection. The New York Bar Association initiated expedited disciplinary proceedings, and sources within the U.S. Attorney's Office confirmed he was under investigation for potential criminal charges related to witness tampering and obstruction of justice. The most profound impact, however, was on those who had lived in fear of Diddy's power and influence. One by one, they were reclaiming their voices and their truth. The system of silence that had protected him for so long had finally irrevocably broken down. In a particularly poignant moment, Jasmine Taylor, the former assistant who had testified about Diddy's surveillance methods, held an impromptu press conference on the courthouse steps. Surrounded by other former employees, she pulled a small photograph from her pocket, an ID badge from her first day working at Bad Boy Records. "This was me at 22, she said, her voice strong despite the emotion evident on her face. "I was so proud that day, so excited to be part of something I thought was revolutionary. I didn't know I was walking into a system designed to break people." She looked directly into the cameras. To anyone still trapped in similar situations, whether in music, film, business, or anywhere else, there is a way out. There are people who will believe you. There are prosecutors who will fight for you. And there are judges who will ensure justice is served, no matter how powerful your abuser might be. The court of public opinion, which had often been manipulated through carefully orchestrated PR campaigns, was shifting as well. Social media platforms were flooded with accounts from people sharing their own experiences of industry abuse and exploitation. The hashtag System of Silence began trending, with users posting stories of how they had been intimidated into silence by